Oh, there we go. Boom. See, it's what happens when you test stuff for the first time. You never know if it's actually going to work. So here we go. This should be good. You got my audio. Man, that was stressful. I was a little worried you guys weren't going to hear me for the rest of the time there. All right. Thanks for joining us today. Let me, I guess, start over because I'm not sure if you can hear me. So I don't know where this is even streaming from. This is going to be annoying. All right, cool. So great to see everybody. Thanks for joining today. As I was saying before, even though you couldn't hear me, that we had planned on doing a live stream earlier today, and then the guest had to sort of leave, so we couldn't do it. We had to figure something else out, but I wanted to make sure we got some content for you today. And so today I want to talk to you about the importance of having a common approach, a common framework to creating your strategic plan, because otherwise you won't be able to move anything forward as you move your plan forward. This week we've talked to, I don't know how many I've talked to, 10 different people to try to do strategic plan sessions, and everybody's getting into the new year of wanting to redo their strategy. And everybody has a different approach to doing it. I brought out, because I like to bring some show and tell, I brought a cookie cutter thing, because I felt like it represented a little bit about the strategic planning process. It's like if you follow some sort of mold or repeatable thing, then you're going to have the same thing over again. The challenge is that everybody has a different approach to how they want to do strategic planning, and the experience is different for everybody. I posted this earlier today, or earlier in the week, and hopefully it'll show up. And I thought it was captured. What we're talking about here is the difference between when, the professional tries to design something versus I'm not going to call it amateur, because everybody has some idea of doing strategic planning, but unfortunately that's sort of what makes them dangerous sometimes. And so I'm going to share this really quick. I guess that doesn't zoom in at all, so that's cool. There we go. You can see that a little bit. We design everything, $500. We design, you watch, $800. The more the client gets involved, the more challenging it is. And so I just wanted to share that, because everybody that I talk to, especially when we talk about doing strategic planning, they have some sort of experience with strategic planning, and they have their way of doing it. And what I sort of got into a tricky part, I guess, earlier this week, is because all 3 or 4 people that I talked to had a different way of wanting to do strategic planning. And so what I found was, already in terms of alignment, getting aligned on the just the approach to strategic planning was challenging enough, let alone actually getting alignment in a session. And I found that happens a lot with organizations where you have different people who haven't been using a common methodology for a long time, especially if they're getting into strategic planning as a group, or they haven't done it within a structure for a while, that there's no common approach to doing strategic planning. So I'll share one of the other sort of, when we created our one destination model, we really thought of this. So let's show this up here. Our one destination model here. One destination is that clear destination where you want to go, what success looks like, having the common communication, the aligned communication within the organization, common values, behaviors, and language, which is really what are the common language, what are the words that we're using within our organization, and then common tracking and accountability. So a lot of organizations don't have even common goals or common ideas of what success is. Many have values, but they actually don't live them and move them forward. And then that one destination communication, which is the communication that you use within everything. So I guess I could highlight this too, is that we just find that when you don't have a common approach. So I just want to focus on the approach, and not even our approach, just any approach to strategic planning. If you don't have a common approach, you're going to get stuck in this multiple destination trap. It's just a microcosm of your strategic plan. So that everybody has their way of doing it and their approach to doing it and everything else that they want to do. And so there's so many different pieces to the puzzle. And so frankly, I don't care if you use our aligned strategy development methodology or one destination, or if you use EOS, or if you use scaling up or whatever. It's just important that you use a process, that you follow the steps. Because if you don't follow the steps, you're going to mess up, you're going to have challenges, and you're going to have to do it over again. And I don't know what it was. I'll take a bet. I'll take a bet that one of the challenges, because everybody is under so much stress and so much, there's like a lot of uncertainty and a lot of challenges. I'm going to stop the screen share here. Because they're dealing with so much uncertainty and so much stuff around, so much noise, that I'm going to say is like clouding their judgment. Actually, since y'all are on the stream, last week I had too much stuff going on in my brain, and it made me even hard to focus on what I wanted to share in terms of prioritization, because I just had too many decisions. I had too many different options for me to go forward and share. So the number one thing that I recommend as you move forward is have a common process. And through that common process, you need to be clear about what the outcome you want from the meeting, the outcome you want from the strategic planning session, the outcome that you need to get at the end of it. And as long as a group, you can agree on the outcome and the process to get there, you'll be way ahead of trying to piecemeal bits together, or you're trying to just go to the solution without going through a process. So it's the difference between the why. Why are you doing strategic planning? What is that endpoint that you want to accomplish? And then the what. Oh, I'm trying to just figure out how to enter a new market. Oh, I'm trying to like address some of the problems that we're facing. Oh, I have like a culture problem. Is that many of the problems that you could be facing within your organizations is a symptom, and it's like not the root cause. And so if you're just trying to spot address something, you're dealing with the symptoms and the outcomes of it versus the actual root cause of a thing. My wife was actually telling me about this book, and I can't remember their name, wrote a book called Downstream. And so you can imagine, and I haven't even read the book, but I got the sort of gist of it, is you can imagine that you're walking by this stream and you see this puppy in the water. And guys, if I got your analogy wrong, I'm really sorry. Okay. You see this puppy in the water and you're like, oh my God, there's a puppy in the water. You jump in the water, you pull the puppy out, and it's all good. And then as soon as you get out of the water, taking that puppy out, you look, and then there's another puppy just coming down the stream. And then you're like, oh my gosh, you jump back in, save the puppy, come out, and then another puppy comes down. If you don't follow a process for dealing with your organization holistically, you're basically doing the equivalent of jumping into the water and saving puppies. You're not dealing with the thing that's happening upstream, the person who's throwing the puppies in the water in the first place. You're not actually dealing with the cause of the problems. You're just trying to spot address the symptoms. And I've seen it over the past 10 years of doing planning, is that, it hurts because you can like feel it right away. But if you want to do it right and solve it right the first time, you need to actually go through and deal with the entire process. Actually, another metaphor for it, because I really like this, is it was the boot syndrome, or it's not the syndrome, it's a boot paradox or something. And it explained like systemic poverty is that, let's say a really good pair of boots is $50. Okay. And the average person makes $38 a month. And you could get an average pair of boots for $10 or $20 that might last you a year or two. That as a person who makes a low income, you can't afford that $50 pair of boots. So you can only afford the $10 or $20 pair of boots that you're going to have to repair over, get a new pair every 2 years. So you keep reinvesting into this thing. And that's what keeps you into that like poverty trap. And I hadn't thought about it until like just now. But often that's what happens when you don't go through a process and have a system and a structure for addressing the issues, challenges, and opportunities within your organization. Then you're going to have to keep reinvesting and fixing the same problem over and over again. You're dealing with the stuff that's happening downstream versus the stuff that's happening upstream. And once you deal with the upstream problems, then you can spend your time doing whatever else you want, maybe actually getting to that destination you were trying to get to in the first place. And I wanted to share a couple examples of how I've seen, this process going wrong. One, in a education organization, we only had a half day strategy meeting. And, I was suggesting our process, which is, typically vision, mission, strategic priorities, goals, and actions, which is like, again, starting with that end in mind. And one person spent about 20 minutes in the meeting dealing with, well, here's what mission means to me, and here's what my thought is, and here's what, I think it should be this way. And then, we had to have a discussion around it because we can't move forward unless we have that common understanding, common agreement. And we discuss it for 10 15 minutes, and then 10 15 minutes later the lady puts her hand up again and says, actually, you know what, it was right the first time. I say, well, okay, great, is everybody okay with that? Yeah. And they basically just agreed with it in the first place just to move the process forward. And then we had to spend another 15 minutes going back to it. So the time that was spent on the front end actually getting that agreement is super important, but it's interesting and notable as to how people will hang on to what they believe to be right because they just want to be right about the process. And in the process, well, stalling the actual thing that you're trying to accomplish. And it was crazy. We spent in that meeting, a 4-hour meeting, we spent half an hour of it just agreeing on what that word meant. So it was, I don't know, what is that, 15 minutes, 15% of the meeting total time, just agreeing on the language. Yeah, it was crazy. The other thing that I found really gets people stuck is when they actually aren't clear about what the meeting is for, what the strategy process is for. And again, it applies to any meeting. Why are we here? What is the outcome? But I encourage you, as you move forward with your teams, as you move forward through, creating your strategic plan in 2022 or 2021, really get clear and say, hey, like, how will we actually know this is done? And how will we actually know if this is like the successful piece for us? Because fundamentally, regardless of, again, if you use our process or another process, strategic planning looks at where are we now? Where are we going? What's going to get in our way? What do we need to do to get there? And then basically, how are we doing in the plan? And different people think that different things are important. And because people walk into these rooms with so much baggage and so much, pre-prioritized stuff, that your ability as a leader to be able to manage that stuff and have clear outcomes is so important. Because another example is, and I've heard it actually bizarrely, like so many times this week, where people in the past have done strategic planning sessions. They've gotten to like 80, 90% down the way. And then one person or two people made a big stink because they didn't get to talk about this or this didn't get discussed. And then it sort of like derailed the wrapping up of the actual strategy, which sort of wasted a day or two. So before you go on any journey, before you move forward, before you embark on any strategic planning process, it's so important that you have that commonality, those clear expectations, the clear understanding of what you're doing, what you're not doing. Otherwise, you're going to end up wasting tons and tons of time. As I look at my notes, one of the other things that's important, we talked about it when going over this one destination, was the common approach to dealing with problems. Some people like to deal with problems head on. Some people don't want to deal with problems head on, as in when they come within a session. And in my experience, if you don't have an understanding, you don't have an expectation, you don't have a system. I know I've said the same thing over and over again, but that's sort of the theme of today's live stream, is that you got to be really clear on how you're looking at problems as you move forward to where you want to go and how you're going to prioritize dealing with them. Conversation I had with a great guy this morning. He said, hey, okay, I want to get alignment. I want to, and by the way, if you're listening, hi, I would, this is how our call went. Okay. I want to create a strategic plan. I want to get alignment. And but we have to deal with like these problems. We have to better understand like where like this. And my perspective on it, which is I could be totally wrong, was they were trying to address the how of trying to fix where they were at. They were trying to fix and change their like current state. Versus a different perspective was actually looking at where you want to go, and then from there actually pick which road you wanted to take and which of your options. And the reason I share that, like the difference between, hey, dealing with the multitude of problems that you have versus dealing with like where you want to get to and then addressing the problems as they arise, is that there's way more problems than you currently have. And you don't need to fight all of those. You don't need to deal with all of those problems right away. So if you just stay focused on problem, you will live in a muck of problems. Versus if you say, hey, let's take a step back. Let's look big picture of where I want to go. And then you say, okay, I can either go this path, or this path. And each of those different paths are going to have their own problems. So for you, why is that important? As you lead your team, you're going to have to deal with less stuff. You're going to have to spend less energy dealing with problems. And you're actually going to be able to be more successful because you don't have all of that stuff dragging you down. Another conversation I had today, I interviewed Allison, who's leading the strategic plan with Vancouver Island University. And her approach, which I agree with, was looking at the strengths, looking at the things that you do well within your strategy to build on that as a means to get to that next place. And so why I wanted to highlight it again today is because of the amount of uncertainty, because of the mainly it's just the uncertainty. There's too much stuff going on and you don't know what to do. Is that if you try to focus on your circumstances, you probably cannot address your circumstances. COVID is there. The economy is there. It's like the weather. You can't change the weather. You can only change how you address and deal with the weather, which is rooted in like you versus an external thing. So as you go through this process, build your process by identifying and understanding where you are strong in order to move it forward, because that's the only constant is you in your organization. It's why the very first part of our process and most processes is looking at where we are, assessing our sort of inventory, assessing our capabilities, really making sure that we're built to execute on said plan. Because if you don't have that clear understanding as a team of where you're capable and when you're not capable, then when the going really gets tough, then you're then going to have that conversation while you're like sort of floating in the middle of a river, if that makes any sense. So as you move forward, my recommendations: follow a process. Make sure that your team is aligned on the process. Figure out where you want to go. Like, what does that success look like? Work backwards. Build on your strengths and don't get stuck in all of the things that could get in your way. That's why it's strategic and not operational planning. Look at big picture, take a step back to say, hey, are these the things that we really need to be working on, or are they just noise as we move on to our journey? And if you stay focused on that one destination, if you stay focused on creating a clear process with your team by using a language that supports the execution of your plan, you're going to be light years ahead of the people who just focus on what are the challenges ahead and what am I going to do today, tomorrow, the next day. Focus on the big picture, move it forward, and you're going to have a lot more success within your strategic planning process. So I hope you enjoyed today's live stream. Come back next week for another one. I don't know what I'm going to be talking about. If you haven't had a chance yet, be sure to check out the Strategy and Leadership podcast. We're putting one of those out almost every week. By the way, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat. If you're watching the replay, I definitely answer all the questions that come up. We put out a YouTube video almost every 2 days, including this live stream. So I hope it really helps you develop your capacity to lead change with your team, develop your ability to have these tough conversations, because it is a muscle. It's just, as a company and as a leader, I've just been doing it for a really long time. We developed a process based on management science. And again, whether you use our process or somebody else's, follow a process. It'll save you a lot of time, money, energy on the front end, and a lot of stress. I don't care if I'm right or not. It's about you guys. So I hope today helped. I hope you enjoy it. Please put your comments below, questions below, and I look forward to sharing with you next time. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.